समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
A strange fire burned inside Ludwig II's mind, a rage so strong that it even washed over the memory of his long dead father, Maximilian II. Get his skull from the sarcophagus and box his ears, the king ordered. There was the time when a table was set outdoors for the king to dine in the snow with the ghost of Jeanne Antoinette Poisson, mistress to King Louis XV, and the reforming noblewoman Françoise d'Aubigné. Comima Wagner, sister to the composer Richard Wagner, wrote of Ludwig, he ordered dinner for 12 people near Partenkirchen, came alone, greeted the empty seats, and sat down. He also never exited the castles through the doors, but through the windows. And there were endless rumors of young men drawn from the ranks of the army draping themselves around Ludwig II as he pretended to be a Turkish sultan, Alison Rattle and Alison Wainwright. For weeks now, as US President Donald Trump has taken the hammer to his country's institutions, to its economy and its elite, his former national security advisor John Bolton has reignited old questions about the state of the president's mental health. 27 mental health professionals led by Brandy Lee had, in 2017, issued a very controversial assessment suggesting the president was unfit to rule. There were also serious questions about the mental health of former President Joe Biden, which his staff is known to have made considerable efforts to cover up. Less well known is that a third of US presidents who served from 1776 to 1974 demonstrated symptoms of clinically significant depression, bipolar disorder, and alcohol abuse while they were in office, according to the medical scholars Jonathan Davidson, Catherine Conner, and Marvin Schwartz. These illnesses would obviously have impaired their ability to work. To what moments of history were significantly colored, we'll never know. The point isn't just that madness and power are closely entwined though they might indeed be. It's that the real test of the competence of nation states is the ability of courtiers and the elite they represent to make the problem of the Mad King disappear. From the work of medical historians like Reinhard Steinberg and Peter Falkay, it seems probable that Ludwig II suffered from schizophrenia, the disease that also affected his younger brother, Prince Otto. The psychiatrist who treated Ludwig II, Bernhard von Gudden of the Ludwig Maximilians University in Munich and director of the city's asylum, diagnosed him with paranoia. Later, Steinberg and Falkay recorded that an autopsy would suggest damage from childhood meningitis and frontotemporal atrophy as possible causes of delusional psychosis. This didn't mean, however, that the Bavarian state under Ludwig II was dysfunctional. Following the Austria-Prussian War of 1866, in which Bavaria picked the wrong side, Ludwig II was compelled to sign a mutual defense treaty. Like many other German kingdoms, Bavaria lost its independence in 1870 and joined the North German Confederation. The king's excellent diplomats, though, were able to secure a high degree of autonomy for Bavaria. For his contemporaries, Ludwig II's interests in the arts and his construction of extravagant palaces marked him out from other rulers. The fairyland castle of Neuschwanstein, the inspiration for the Disney Cinderella castle in case you've seen it, remains a major tourist attraction. King's house was decorated with Eastern-style kitsch, including a replica of the famous peacock throne which was once kept in New Delhi. Ludwig II was careful, though, to pay for the work with his personal fortune, not state funds. True, his mind became entwined with Richard Wagner's often toxic racial fantasies, which, as Julian Young notes, laid the foundations for a welter of fascist movements. Among other things, Ludwig II's fascination with Wagner would lead him to believe Bavaria needed an absolutist monarchy. Ludwig II fantasized that he would become a moon king, a kind of romantic shadow of the French sun king Louis XIV. But there was no effort to turn his regime into a tyranny, nor any brutal or savage punishments. 14 million marks in debt and demanding loans from other royal courts in Europe, time finally ran out for Ludwig II in 1888. The king responded to his ministers' austerity demands by sacking them. The ministers in turn responded by having Ludwig II declared insane based on a report from 4 psychiatrists, only one of whom had ever met the king. Ludwig II died by suicide. Evidence that large numbers of other rulers suffered from similar problems, often with more painful outcomes for their nations, isn't hard to come by. King George III, who led Britain into its disastrous war with America, is remembered by history as an arrogant authoritarian who sought to reverse constitutional progress in limiting the monarchy's powers. The truth, however, is a little bit more complex. As historian P.D.G. Thomas argues, George III often had no views at all on complex issues, relying on his courtiers and ministers to form one. As important, any monarch would have had to raise high, harsh taxes to garrison the new American territories Britain was pushing into. George III's courtiers engaged his first bouts of bipolar disorder with skilled shows of sycophancy, famously mimicking his seizures to make it appear that they were just some charming royal idiosyncrasy. However, the king's illness became hard to hide, sometimes expressing itself in texts with highly florid sentences made up of more than 400 words. Later, the king was subjected to the less than tender ministrations of the psychiatrist Francis Willis. Like most of his contemporaries, Willis thought madness had to be beaten out of the patient. This meant the liberal use of the gag, restraints, torture by blistering the skin, and threats. George III did appear to improve, or at least learn to hide his illness better, earning Wills a staggering £271,000 in fees and a growing practice among the British elite. Talented politicians like William Pitt the Younger and Charles Fox, as well as an elite in Parliament well tuned to its own interests, kept the country running through all of this chaos. Economists noted that the loss of the American colonies freed up resources to fund the Industrial Revolution and speeded up Britain's search for profits in Asia. The price of George III's madness was not, after all that great. Large numbers of similar examples litter 19th century Europe. Even though Charles VI of France believed quite literally that his body was made of glass, his uncles and advisors upheld royal power. An uprising by the workers of Ghent was crushed in 1832, and the young king's armies effectively dealt with unrest in Paris and Rouen. The psychopathic behaviors of Ivan IV Vasilievich did not diminish his contributions to laying the foundations for the modern Russian state. This isn't to say, of course, that madness doesn't matter. Leaders who understand the uses of nuclear deterrence, the consequences of economic policies, or the social consequences of their actions are preferable for obvious reasons to those who don't or can't. The deranged leader can have hideous consequences for millions of lives. The Soviet Union's Joseph Stalin, though, was almost certainly not clinically mad, as scholars Francois Retiev and Andrei Wessels note. Yet his psychopathic personality drove the march into the gulags. Adolf Hitler's drug addiction may well have contributed to his crazed decision-making. However, history also demonstrates that elites can and have often exercised the responsibility of containing royal madness. Even if they cannot always mitigate the consequences of bad decision-making, rulers' worst impulses can often be reined in by effective courts. In some cases, of course, evil rulers were simply removed from the scene. The lesson for electorates, though, is a more complex one. Too often, the public is reluctant to recognize the demagogue or the simply insane for what they are. The temptation to read meaning, even redemption, into crazed ravings is deeply human. The consequences of a bad choice can be profound, self-inflicted suffering for all of us. I'm Praveen Swami and I'm a contributing editor to ThePrint. Thank you for watching this episode of Security Code.